Alright folks, so this is chapter 4, 4-3. This is epithelial tissue and glands, because epithelial tissues make up our glands. So first of all, we classify epithelial tissue, and here's how we classify it. We classify it by the shape of the cell, and shape is either flat, which is squamous, cube-shaped, which is cuboidal, or tall, which is columnar. And that's one way we classify it, which is shape. So this is all shape. And then we classify it by how many layers it has. And if it has one layer, it's said to be simple. And if it has more than one layer, it's said to be stratified. So this is layers right here. Now, having said that, you put these two classification systems together. For example, you could be simple squamous epithelium, which is flat cells of one layer. Or you could be simple cuboidal epithelium, which is cube-shaped cells that have one layer. Or you could be simple columnar epithelium, which is tall cells that are one layer. Or you could be stratified squamous, which is many layers of flat cells. You could be stratified cuboidals, or many layers of cuboidal cells. And you could be stratified columnar, which is many layers of columnar cells. Now here's the deal. Do you remember there's a basolateral surface and there's an apical surface? We classify these stratified epithelial tissues by what their apical cells look like. So here's the actual apical surface right here. So this is an apical cell. And we classify this tissue by the apical cell. This is stratified This is stratified columnar because the apical cell is columnar and it's more than one layer. You can look down here, you might think that this is cuboidal tissue, but it's not. If you look at the apical surface, it's squamous. So this is stratified squamous. So we classify these by what the apical layer looks like. You're going to need to know locations of different cells. The simple squamous epithelium are seen in our mesothelium, in our endothelium. That means that our serous membranes are made of simple squamous epithelium, and that means that endothelium is the epithelial tissue that lines your blood vessels. So all your blood vessels are lined by simple squamous epithelium. In your mesothelium, which lines your serous membranes, your pleural, pericardium, peritoneal cavities, they're all simple squamous epithelium. All right, the alveoli lining in your lungs is simple squamous epithelium. Now you're going to have to know where stratified squamous epithelium is. It's any place that there's friction. High friction is stratified squamous. Well, what's high friction? Well, the rectum, the vagina, the mouth, your skin. This is all high friction. Now, there is a difference between the mouth, the vagina, and the rectum, and your skin. These three, let me erase skin here so I can draw. These three, rectum, vagina, and mouth, they're all stratified squamous epithelium, but they're non-keratinized. So yeah, they suffer from friction, and they slough off. The friction applied to them slough off. So during defecation, your rectum has friction. During sexual intercourse, your vagina has friction. When you chew a Dorito potato chip, your mouth has friction. And the cells will slough off, and they'll be replaced. But they're non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. And keratin is a pretty tough protein. First of all, keratin is a protein that makes up intermediate filaments. But keratin is a tough protein found in epithelial cells as well. If you want to know what keratin is, it's what makes up your fingernails. It's also in your hair. Now you have another source, another location of stratified squamous epithelium, and that's your skin. But your skin is keratinized. Skin is keratinized, stratified stratified squamous epithelium. All right, so that's stratified squamous epithelium. Your simple cuboidal epithelium is found a lot in your kidneys. You can see simple cuboidal epithelium in your kidneys. It's lining your renal tubules. So your proximal convoluted tubule, your loop of Henle, your distal convoluted tubule, it's primarily composed of a simple cuboidal epithelium. There is some simple columnar in there as well, but we'll just say that primarily the kidneys are composed of simple cuboidal epithelium. Stratified cuboidal epithelium, somewhat rare, and it lines some of your ducts. So you could have a sudoriferous duct. Sudoriferous. That's a sweat gland. A sudoriferous gland is a sweat gland. So the ducts of your sweat glands can be stratified cuboidal. Somewhat rare though, they're not that common. Simple columnar. These are found in your intestinal tract, your digestive tract. They're also found in places like your fallopian tubes, your uterine tubes. They're also found in the kidneys, as I mentioned before, but we're going to say the kidneys are simple cuboidal. So your digestive tract has simple columnar. Now your air passageways, your trachea has a columnar as well, but it's special, and I'm going to get to it in a few minutes. Now stratified columnar is very rare. It's rare like stratified cuboidal is rare. But we do find it in a couple places. One place you find it is the parotid glands. It's a salivary gland. You can see the parotid gland right here, and that's what they're showing you is stratified columnar is in the parotid gland. You can also see it lining the epiglottis and also places of friction. Now, you're going to say, I thought you told me stratified squamous. Yep, stratified squamous is found where you have friction. But stratified columnar is also found in the anus, as well as some areas of that are stratified squamous. So there you go. Stratified columnar. There's another tissue it's special. It's found in the ureters and bladder. This is called transitional epithelium. It's called transitional because when the organ is relaxed, it looks like this. This is the relaxed state. How would you classify it? I don't know. There's cuboidal on the bottom, but we don't name it by the bottom. We name it by the apical. And you're going to say, well, the apical doesn't, it looks like a mixture between cuboidal and columnar maybe. And I would say, yeah, maybe. That's why we call this transitional. But the real reason we call this transitional is because when the bladder stretches, now it looks different. This is stretched. So the transitional epithelium allows an organ or a gland to stretch. And it's found in the ureters and the bladder, transitional epithelial tissue. Now this is another special one. This is called pseudostratified columnar. It's not really stratified. It's falsely stratified, if you will. And this is found in the trachea and air passageways. And quite often, this is the only place that I know this is found. Quite often we call this pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium because, of course, it has cilia on here. And there's goblet cells mixed throughout. I'm looking for a goblet cell here. I think I see one, but I'm not positive, so I'll show you in lab. Yeah, so intermixed. Behind this nucleus, this is out of phase, there's actually a goblet cell. I know you can't tell it's there, but it's there. And the goblet cell secretes a mucus. And the mucus is sticky and it traps debris and viruses and bacteria that try to get into our lungs. And then what do the cilia do? The cilia beat upward and they remove the mucus and the trapped bacteria and viruses, and you swallow them into your stomach and kill it with your acids. So that's what is going on here. Pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. Pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium aligns your air passageways. The reason they call it pseudostratified is because it looks like it's stratified. It looks like you have 1, 2, 3, 4 cells here. But technically, all of these cells are actually touching the basement membrane. Believe it or not, this cell right here is touching the basement membrane. Behind these two, this cell has a little thin sliver touching the basement membrane. So it looks like it's stratified, but it's really not. They all touch the basement membrane, and they all go to the surface. Pseudostratified ciliated columnar. All right, we also, the epithelial cells are also involved in making your glands. Now, I already mentioned one cell, and I called it a goblet cell. It's the only example of a single-celled gland there is. A goblet cell is a mucus cell, or what we call a mucin cell. It's a single-celled gland. All the rest of the glands are multicellular. And we classify these glands based on what they secrete or how they secrete them. So let's look at what they secrete first. First of all, you can have a serous gland. It's a thin, watery fluid. This is found in your serous membranes, like your pleural, your peritoneal, and your pericardial. And we've already talked about this a little bit, so it's probably second. You're probably getting it. Pericardial. We have mucus glands. These secrete mucus and mucins. And goblet cell is one example of a mucus gland, but we have other mucus glands as well. So these secrete mucins. And then we have mixed glands, and these secrete a serous fluid and a mucus. So they're mixed. But then we classify by mode. By the way, both classification systems are used. You need to know both. And the classification by mode is like this. If you do exocytosis to secrete your product, if you're a gland and you do exocytosis to secrete your product, then you are merocrine, also known as ecrine. If you pinch off a piece of the cell, then you are apocrine. If you pinch off a piece of the cell to secrete your products, then you're called apocrine. And if the cell dies to secrete your product, then you are called holocrine. So those are the three modes, and I got pictures of the three modes for you. So this is showing you exocytosis right here. So this is a merocrine or ecrine secretion. It's called merocrine or ecrine. You can see exocytosis. The vesicles are fusing and releasing. No damage to the cell whatsoever. And where is that found? Oh, it's found in salivary glands. Other glands as well. A lot of your sweat glands are merocrine glands. So there you go. Now we also have it right here where a piece of the cell pinches off to release its product. And now this cell, this piece of the cell breaks down and the product is released. It's a heck of a way to release your product by losing a piece of yourself, and that have to be degraded to release your product. But that's how this does it, and it's called apocrine secretion. And then lastly, how these cells secrete their product is the cell dies. The cell bursts or dies, and that's called holocrine secretion. The classic example of holocrine secretion is the sebaceous gland right here. It secretes sebum onto a hair follicle or directly onto your skin, and the entire cell of the sebaceous gland dies to secrete the sebum. In fact, that's one of the reasons bacteria love to eat sebaceous products, because it's not just the sebum, but there's cell fragments and other things there. It's very nutritious for the bacteria. And of course, when bacteria start eating the sebum and they clog up pores, they can cause acne. And a famous bacterium that does that is called Propionibacterium acnes. By the way, I didn't mention this, but the apocrine example they gave you is from a mammary gland. Mammary glands are funny in that they do have lots of glands that are apocrine, but there are some merocrine glands in the mammary. There are some merocrine secretion in the mammary glands, and in fact, there are some holocrine secretions in the mammary glands as well. So there's both. All right. We'll come back to that when we do the skin, because when we do the skin, we're going to talk about sebaceous glands and sweat glands again. These are structural classifications, and it's pretty simple. You could have a tube or a dilated tube. So let me just go forward and back again. You can have tubular or acinar. I'm looking for the picture. Oh, right here it is. So compare this one and compare this one. This is tubular, pretty straight tube. And this is a tube that's dilated at the end. You can see it's dilated. And that's called alveolar or acinar. So if you have one tube or one dilated tube, you're called simple tubular or simple acinar. All right, so those are two types of glands. You could have a coiled tube, and this is a coiled tube right here. There isn't a coiled acinar, but there are branched acinars. You could have a branched tube. You can see branched tubule here, and you can have a branched acinar. Remember, every time you see the word alveolar, you can also say acinar. So you can have a branched tube or a branched acinar. You can have multiple branches, which is called compound tubular, or you can have multiple acinar, which is called compound acinar. And then you can have a mix between tubes and acinar, and it's called compound tubuloacinar. Some salivary glands are compound tubuloacinar. So we have different structural classifications of these glands. All right. That's it. Next up will be, I believe, connective tissue.